Welcome to the Voice of Retail. I'm Michael LeBlanc, NRF Top Retail Voice for 2026 and Rethink Retail 2026 Top Retail Expert. This podcast is produced in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. Jim Okamura, welcome back to the Voice of Retail podcast. How you doing, my friend?
Doing really great, thanks. Good to see you.
We are here live at the NRF Big Show. We're in the Narvar podcasting studio. We are renting some space, so to speak, from the Remarkable Retail podcast. So any opportunity I can get you on the mic, though. You and I talk often, but you're here. You've been here a couple of days at the show, so I thought, hey, let's take advantage of having you here and being together. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a busy few days, as always, when you come to the NRF, Big Show. And,
How many have you lost count? I think it's 18 for me.
I was trying to do that, recently. I think I'm 28 out of 30 years.
Wow.
Right, which is kind of crazy.
What else have you done? 28 out of 30. What else have you done that many years?
Not too many other things, that would kind of rank up there. So just seeing kind of the evolution over the years, and I think I always measure things by kind of the, if you could say, the buzz of, are people starting off the year, with
trepidation, excitement. I've been hearing. I'm really interested to hear what you've been hearing. I've been hearing a tale of two stories. Some are saying, I've already, I'm not even going to spend my budget yet. Other years, and I've heard other stories, is like, I think, we're going to have a good year, and I'm here to buy. I'm here to find stuff.
Yeah,
right?
that more the latter, which has been very encouraging, for us just to hear, because I think, last year I'd characterize as a lot of inaction on the part of, so many brands and
think back to what was going on last year. It was like it's not like wildly more certain today. We have another 25% tariff potentially if you're here in the U.S. from this week, but you weren't sure what was coming this time last year at all.
Well, and particularly, I think, when I've been talking to people in our global trade, community and such, with the Global E-commerce Leaders Forum, like last year was the year of uncertainty. This year, certainly, I've been hearing a lot more in terms of that glass half full mentality, looking to, again, get back to some more proactive things as opposed to just reacting, to whatever, latest regulatory issues they had to deal with.
Right on. Well, we've kind of jumped right in. So for those who've missed our conversations before or somehow don't know you, who are you? What do you do for a living? What's your background?
So Jim Okamura, I'm a partner at the retail strategy consulting firm McMillanDoolittle. I'm also a co-founder of the Global E-commerce Leaders Forum, which we have worked together for many years now, and it's really nice to kind of get back into some of the GELF, as we call it, global expansion issues, right?
Yeah, right on. And we're here in the U.S., but we're a couple of Canadians. Where'd you grow up?
Grew up in Lethbridge, Alberta, so just was out there a few weeks ago and got some great skiing in Banff, so very happy to find some snow this year.
And today you are based in Chicago.
Chicago-based, been there for over 25 years at this point, which is kind of crazy in itself.
It's a great city. I mean, let's start talking about retail. So, I do a store tour. You and I were here in... earlier in September, we were doing a dinner for the GELF community, but we had an opportunity to go do a little bit of walking.
Yep.
And let's start at Tecovas. So you're a master at store tours. I've learned from your trade craft what to look for. You guys are just so good at it and pointing things out. So when we went to a place like Tecovas, which for those of you listening don't know, they're a bespoke kind of, I guess, Western wear retailer, radical hospitality. They're in New York. I just learned. I thought that was their farthest north. They're based in Austin. They just opened a store in Detroit. So that's now their closest to the 49th. Well, what did you think of a store like Tecovas, and what did you make of their approach to the way they merchandised? And
yeah, again, I thought, again, what they were doing there seemed right on brand, for starters. Loved the kind of the service levels that they were doing, but it was always interesting to see. Like, I don't think I knew of them from their different departments, right? So just seeing the women's and men's sections, along with, of course, the footwear and so on. But I thought it was a great experience, a great expression of the brand, and it sounds like they've been very busy in that Soho store, right? So been hearing lots of good things from others who have been checking out some of the latest and greatest in New York.
Fun factoid, I didn't know this when you and I were there, but you know who's on their board? Christine Day from Vancouver.
Oh, no kidding.
Former Lululemon. Many Canadian retailers would know and love Christine, but she's on their board, so she's very excited about the prospects for that organization. So, what a testament. Now, stepping back a couple of clicks, you ran a store tour in Chicago, speaking of Chicago, for Shop Talk last fall. Where did you take people, and what were the highlights?
We had quite an expansive retail store tour program for the Shop Talk Fall program called Shop Walks, which they originally started for their Shop Talk Europe show in Barcelona, which Barcelona's got a great retail scene, that kind of made a lot of sense. So when they came to Chicago, we said, absolutely, let's kind of put together some Chicago store tours. Chicago's got lots of great retail. So whether it was kind of newer to physical retailing like Vuore, again they were kind enough to host us all the way through the traditional brands like Tiffany's hosted us in their big flagship there. But I still think one of the highlights was the Patagonia Warren Wells store, which is their only store in North America that has the re-commerce business model built right into it, and they've really kind of built that up over the years. So a lot of the retailers that were on that tour were really fascinated to kind of grill the store manager in terms of some of the economics and so on. So just very insightful for any brand that's kind of looking at the circular movement of goods and things like that. So
I read a report that the luxury retailers are looking, how should I say, more favorably at both resell and returns. I think they were doing it just kind of, it was wrapping up in their environmental promise. But I think they're genuinely, I want to get your input, that they're genuinely turning their minds to this is maybe a way to get people in the brand at a lower price point, still maintain very clear ownership of the brand and the brand experience, and manage it that way. I think I don't know if they've turned 180 degrees, but I do think they're looking at it more favorably. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on that. Even in the luxury world, where I think there was probably perhaps the most resistance, to kind of the circular movement of goods, they too have come along. So that's a great indicator in a sense, just how widespread like the movement is, in a sense, right? But it's for any brands, looking to maintain that brand control, I think, the authentication of, the real goods is super important.
I see what you did there, the real.
The real goods,
big retailer of such things.
Exactly, but it is really in that supply chain, and how you can kind of set up, an authentication process at scale, which is the hardest thing to do, and that's certainly where we see a lot of companies really investing in that, right? So that
I liked our T-Rex that's here. They have that reselling on the floor, but they're not just reselling, but they're also rebuilding, right? So they got a sewing facility and a repair facility. I thought that was really smart, the integration of both repair and reselling together. I thought those are a nice match.
Yeah, we saw that at the Fall Raven store as well in Chicago. Again, their flagship there, again, part of, like our Shop Walks, tour. It was great to kind of contrast that almost, with Patagonia because they're on the same block. But again, just where they've got a lot of their tailoring services, so again, it becomes almost repair services. You've got a broken zipper.
A reason to come.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Favorite, item that you want to kind of refresh, it is a great option, and it is a great way to bring new customers into the family, so to speak. So
well, and I think they've been looking at that. When I think of that model, I think of the Rack, and I think of Saks Fifth. That kind of idea that we can get a younger, less affluent customer and then be with them for the rest of their lives and attach it to the brand. it's not always been that wildly a successful strategy, I don't think. So, the jury's out, but I do think that keeping it within the brand has some currency to it.
Absolutely. Again, it's a different mentality that, the management team has to really embrace, right? And I think that has been a big part of the uphill battle has been really internal, for a lot of these companies.
Yeah, I've heard it described as, well, you might as well fight gravity because it's happening anyway.
Right.
And I think it is is it a way you think that consumers are reacting to the current value situation, that they're more I've been kind of skeptical about the whole resale market or the secondhand market being a thing in apparel other than a niche.
Yeah.
Do you think it's going to be a bigger piece? It's growing, but it's small.
It's growing, and I'd hate to think it's just a function of kind of the macro economy, where people are looking to kind of cut back. I actually do believe that, with the younger consumers, and we'll see with Gen Alpha as they kind of come along, how they embrace, the, again, circular movement of goods and finding cool stuff, right? I mean, that obviously what's, meaningful at those, demographics, again, will make what is a fluctuating trend into something that is longer lasting.
Yeah. Let's move from Chicago to Toronto. You and I, again, found ourselves in Toronto. You had an Applehoff partner meeting, and it was hosted in Toronto. We walked Yorkdale together.
Yeah.
And particularly Simon's was the big hit. What else? What did you observe, and then what did your partners observe?
Well, again, it was great to host or have our international partners come to Toronto and be hosted by the J.C. Williams group who organized all those meetings. And for me, having lived in Toronto for a couple of times in my life, it was great to kind of go back to some places like, whether it was Yorkdale, just seeing, where the high-end, mall scene was happening, or Kensington Market, right? I mean, and just seeing how vital that is and how the local retailers are still fighting for their independence, which I thought, was awesome.
Well, let's move to more back to New York here. So you landed here. What have you been doing for the past couple of days? We started talking about the vibe, but, what's your tradecraft when you come to a show like this? You've been coming to a lot of these shows. Do you preset a lot of meetings, or are you here to discover and explore?
It's always a bit of everything, right? There's obviously seeing a lot of old friends. There is meeting new people. There is, walking the floor.
Fellow Rethink Retail, top retail expert.
Absolutely. There's so many almost sub-communities now, right? I mean, when we both, been in the retail sector for our whole lives, it's really interesting just to see how, I guess, the fragmentation, right? And so all these different tribes that you kind of are part of, that's just part of the fabric of retail, right?
Yeah.
And that's what kind of makes it interesting when you're hearing, and especially here where there is such an international, delegation. So I get to catch up, with our Brazilian partners, our French partners, our Danish partners. They're all, here in force, and often bringing clients, with them. So, that is, great to kind of get, a perspective that's more than just a U.S.-centric, perspective.
So you've been here, 24, 36 hours, walking the show, not all of those hours, but sometimes it feels like it. Yeah. Anything catch your eye? What do you see that's interesting?
No, again, obviously, the AI theme, persists, obviously.
What
and
AI? What is this AI?
Yeah, you hear some of that around, here and there. Best thing I saw was at the UST, booth, where again they were showing and giving me a demo in terms of just how they're using AI to really enhance and produce, image for product detail pages in e-commerce, right? And just so again, I think that whole theme of productivity gains, right? And where we're going to start to see AI use cases, now scaling, right? I think moving past what has been a proof of concept piloting, stage now, and now we're starting to see more of this, happening. So it is interesting. I think, other themes, you're hearing from the where does the human fit in, with all of these AR, agents, and so again, it's interesting as people kind of jockey for what's my team going to look like, in the future, and how many of them are actually virtual agents.
Yeah, let me follow up on that, because you're a real great expert in organizational design, and I start to think about this getting ahead of ourselves, where AI is replacing a whole entire tranche of junior, less experienced people. Let's call them interns, summer interns. Because a lot of the work that you do when you begin your career is pretty by road, and it's necessary. But if all that gets replaced by AI, I worry that at an organizational, we wipe out an entire generation who just can't suddenly vault to be a manager. And they'll never get those skills. I'm not sure it keeps you up at night, but how do you think about organizational design in the era of high productivity AI, very attractive, but at the same time, doesn't build your culture and it doesn't build a bench strength in your team?
Yeah, and yet at the same time, there's so many deja vu moments from the early days of digital retail too, right? And so, what did we learn there? From both an organization standpoint, but often I think there is that reverse mentoring, opportunity, and while yes, a lot of those I'd say traditional entry level jobs probably aren't going to exist as we once knew them. Those same, younger professionals, let's say, again, are going to be the first generation who grew up with prompts, right? So, I'm not quite sure I totally embrace the prompt engineering, but yet that
somebody
I think
said
is
you used to
something.
learn how to code, now you learn how to prompt.
Right, yeah. Who needs to code now, right?
You just prompt. So building on this, you got me thinking about something. I read this post by someone on LinkedIn, and the essence of the conversation was that a board member came in and talked to an organization and said, "Hey, how many people under 25 or 26 do you have on the team?" And I think the answer was some relatively small percentages. Well, how on earth are you ever going to design and understand your customer who's younger without those younger people?
Yeah.
And that reverse mentoring idea, but also do you put some stock in that you need, I always put the inverse. I said, when I was at the shopping channel, our customer was 55, 85. I don't need a bunch of 85-year-olds to understand good research, good diagnostics. But do you put some stock in how you build out your team, that you need those younger people to really inform the rest of us, we can say now, about what's happening with the kids and how to sell to them and how they're thinking? And you just can't get that from research. You just got to get from working and living with them. Yeah,
no, I've seen that discussion more within some of the technology solution providers, right, where they're saying they are really trying to pair up, older and younger engineers in a sense that really do kind of tackle perhaps the same problem in a different way, right? And I we see that all the time with any younger, whether it's shopper or our own kids, right? So I think I do place a lot of stock in that because all of this is new for everyone, right? So as we kind of figure out our how do we develop and then scale these business use cases. I think the source of some of those ideas certainly isn't necessarily going to be top down, right? And I think some of the organizations who can kind of harness that. That's where I do like where we're seeing different solutions being put in the hands of store associates, for example, right? How again can you provide them with the digital tools that's going to help them stay in front of that shopper
or simplify their experience. I was working with talking to some folks at IBM, and they were thinking of AI as a platform because they said something like, I don't know if they got the numbers exactly right, but in any store there's 20 or 30 different systems that an associate or a manager has to access to pull in, from scheduling data to task data to whatever, and that the opportunity is to simplify their lives and make them, make it easier and then therefore have better customer experiences, right?
If there's one word that I think, kind of captures, I think where people are thinking about AI, it is simplify. Right, I think that came across to me very loud and clear in one of the presentations that I was seeing during this show, and I thought, that makes a ton of sense because you can go down so many rabbit holes at this point, right? So again, when we think of removing friction, from any, let's just say, shopper experience, but could equally be the associate, experience. How can we simplify through just better tools and almost place the human in the middle, that make them that much more of a central character. What
I heard was a big unlock from one retailer for them is they did employee surveys, And in any employee survey, they had a lot of employees, there'd be an open text field, and those were just a nightmare. They said we could never just parse that data, and it was
Right.
just, but now they're using AI to parse the data, and it's been a big unlock because they can see 3 or 4 things that come out in like 10 minutes of thousands and thousands of survey responses. So it's really, I love your idea about that simplify. Now they can actually get that data really quickly and act on it. So
No, it's true. I think, it's certainly a modern version of the old suggestion box.
right on. We're coming up on our time. Let's spend the last bit of time on we talked about at the beginning, GELF, the Global E-Commerce Leaders Forum, your expertise, and we've been doing work with that community, which is cross-border, e-commerce, international commerce. What do you, it's been a dynamic year for them, right, as they try to bounce along with all the different changes in the tariff world. But I have to think there's in this, as we all talk about the restructuring of global trade, these partners that we've had in the community, they're at the core of that. They've got to be the ones who are helping really restructure global trade in a very fundamental, pragmatic way.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a good year on kind of the international and kind of global front. After what was obviously a bumpy year, this past year, I think a lot of the brands and retailers I've been talking to are kind of looking to getting back to growth as normal, let's say, right? Which would be a relief from kind of being on their heels and reacting to some of the problems that clearly have popped up. That's where we're really encouraged to dive into some kind of meaty topics like brand integrity. When you're a brand like a Victoria's Secret working through a Middle Eastern licensee partner, and how do you deal with the marketplaces that are just sprouting up everywhere now. So for a lot of brands that have what I'd say is a complex go-to-market channel strategy across their various global regions, these are the same companies that we've been hearing from that says, let's figure out some of these solutions together. And again, these are great examples of where it is peer-to-peer learning. Right, just we want to gather some smart people, bring some challenging topics to the table, and let the community kind of figure out so what are some ideas that each of those companies could kind of take away from these kind of workshops.
And for those listening, the feedback we've got from our community has been, let's have a 2-tier kind of approach. The kind of I'm new to this versus I'm a veteran, and it's just 2 different types of discussions, right? And we're thinking about, you and I have been thinking and talking about, whether it's dinners or whether it's been an expert morning, and we've even had requests in the community to do an all-Canadian what's going on in Canada. Canada's still a very vital market for the US.
It's still the biggest market for most U.S. brands in terms of their international. So it is there's no limit to the topics we can kind of be covering, but it is again where we're seeing the need for different segments are at different stages of their global journey. Let's say, right? Yeah. And so from a cross-border e-commerce business model, which today seems rather simplistic in a sense, easy to flip that switch. I think now we're seeing some of those brands graduate into other business models and start to make bigger investments, bigger bets, essentially, right? So once that starts happening, then I think anyone approving those investments certainly wants to see show me why you're spending that money.
Well, it's an exciting start to the year as always here. I was saying, and many of us were saying, it's so early. It's a week earlier than it used to be historically, so it's right on top of you. But it's fast-paced, and here we are. Last question for you. 1 or 2 pieces of advice for retailers listening about how to think about 2026.
Yeah, I certainly get your act together in terms of your AI governance and your data readiness, right? I think, those have been, generally accepted just foundational pieces for any company regardless of size. And I think that starts to unlock then, what are those proof of concept, tests that you're going to be putting out there, hopefully with the opportunity to scale those POCs, right? And so I think let's move this, from those small scale tests to something that is, more meaningful at scale. And we'll see, I think, a lot of interesting, cases for that, this year. I think we've already, this was a great show just to see, okay, which brands, were, able to step up to the plate.
Right.
Yet a lot of companies are still kind of, just getting started. So.
There's a lot of diversity in where people are at in their journey. Now, if people want to use your services to help them do things like governance and put this together, I know you've done that kind of work. How do they get in touch?
You can reach me at McMillanDoolittle. The email address is jokamura@mdretail.com, or they can reach out to you because you always know where to find me.
And you're on LinkedIn, too. So if anybody's listening, I've had discussions with retailers said it's a great start. We should do governance, and I would recommend you call Jim because he'll take you on that journey. So,
well, great to see you, Michael. This was awesome to hang out as always, and it's a great start to the retail year. It feels like, right?
Safe travels back home. Thanks again for joining me here in the Narvar podcasting studio at the Big Show in New York.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of The Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, follow on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically each week. And be sure and check out my other retail industry media properties, the Remarkable Retail Podcast with Steve Dennis and the Global E-Commerce Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, Senior Retail Advisor, Keynote Speaker. If you want more content or chat, follow me on LinkedIn. Safe travels, everyone.